So this lesson will be our third and final go at expanding. It's going to use some of the concepts that you've picked up in the previous two lessons, but things will just look slightly different for you today. A little bit of a different context. So all the skills that you've built up over the previous week will come in handy. So this is kind of where we're at so far. We know that if we have a set of brackets with some terms inside it, couple of terms, and we've got something outside it, that it just multiplies its way in one by one till it's finished. Right, so the 5 multiplied by the x gives us 5x, and the 5 multiplied by the 12 gives it 60. Right, pretty straightforward concept that it just has to multiply into each thing inside the brackets until it's done multiplying. We can apply that same concept, but then do it with variables involved, with letters, so letter times letter. So we just should know that the 2x on the outside has to come inside and get everything on the inside. All right, so 2x and 3x go together to make 6, because 2 times 3 is 6, and we've got x squared. That's what happens when you go x multiplied by x. We then notice that the 2x is multiplying something that's negative, so we can put a minus there. And then 2x times 4 is 8x, and we've got the negative there to show that it's actually minus 8x. We then built on that and handled doing not one expansion, but two. Right, we did them one at a time. So we went 4 times x, 4x. 4 times 7 is 28. Right, we were done with that one. We move on to this one here. 6 times x is 6x, and 6 times negative 2, because we're timesing a positive and a negative now, is minus 12. And then what you were required to do after that is actually combine up your like terms. So putting these two together because they're both all about the letter x, and putting these two together because they're just numbers. So 4x and 6x makes 10x, and 28 take 12 is positive 16. All right, so if you could handle this and this and that, you'll be well set for today. Today is going to be using all these skills in combination, but it's just going to look a little bit different for you. All right, so this is how it looks today. It's going to be a little bit different because all of a sudden we've got one of these sets of brackets, which is, it's called a binomial because there are two things inside it. Don't get caught up on that. But we've got one lot of brackets next to another lot of brackets. All right, so one binomial is multiplying another binomial, right? So we're kind of used to seeing a set of brackets here at the back, and then we've just got either a number or a number and a variable, number and a letter out the front, and we times that in. Essentially today is just going to ask you to do a little bit more multiplying, which means you'll have to show that working out and simplify your answers down. And the reason why you won't have any trouble with today's work, as long as you've been keeping up with the previous couple of lessons, is it's really the same old process. As long as you guys can just do the basics, which is having a bracket and then multiplying something into it, right? So if I times the a into this bracket, right, we know that a times 3a is 3a squared, right? There's an a in another one, so we put the squared there to show there's two. And a times 5 is 5a, right? If we know how to do that, we come across here and we're multiplying the 4 into this bracket here. So we'd say that 4 times 3a is 12a, and 4 times 5 is 20. Then you're already halfway finished, because your questions, instead of looking like this and being apart, you're going to have something that looks like this today. So we've got this bracket here, the 3a plus 5, and then this bracket here out the front of it. Well, it has two parts as well, right? It's got an a and it's got a 4. But essentially all you've got to do is you've got to do what we just did up here. You're going to start with the a, right? So we're going to start with this letter a. We're going to multiply the a in over here and over there. And that's going to give us our first two answers, which, as we saw up here, right? This is literally what we just did up here, right? It goes 3a squared and 5a. And then the a, well, it's finished multiplying this bracket over here, right? It multiplied both things in it. So now we only have one other thing that needs to multiply in, and that's this 4. So we multiply the 4 in. So that would give us 4a, and that would give us 20. Sorry, that shouldn't be 4a, should it? We went 4 times 3a. So let's put a 12 there. It's 12a. There we go. All right, so we're really just using each of these things in the first bracket one at a time to multiply this whole second bracket. right? It's as if we were given the a separately to multiply in and the 4 separately to multiply in. But because we're doing it all in one question, they all end up next to each other, and then we just have to do the like terms and simplify and put together. So the only things that actually go together from this particular question are the a's in the middle. Right, so we can put 5a and 12a together to get 17a's, and then we've still got 3a squared, still a plus there, and there's still a plus 20. All right, so your process is basically going to be one thing at a time. In that first bracket is going to multiply into everything in the second, right? So first we chuck the a into there, then we chucked the 4 into there. It made a whole bunch of stuff on our screen, a whole bunch of algebra, and then anything that was a like term with the same letter, same power, whatever, we put together to get our final answer of 3a squared, 17a, and 20. All right, so as long as you guys can get your head around this process, that I've got this set of brackets out the front, and there's multiple parts to it, and each part multiplies in one at a time. If you can be organized like that and write down your answers as you go and show you're working out, you should be okay. The only thing that might mix people up is getting confused with positives and negatives. All right, so it's really probably good to think about your positives and negatives before you start. So if I've got a 2a minus b, then it's really important to identify that this is a negative. The 2a isn't, right? There's no minus out the front of it, but the b is a negative. So when it's multiplying its way in, it's going to be multiplying, by a negative. Okay, so when I multiply this by that, this is multiplying a negative by a positive, which means I'd be putting a minus before my answer. But say I did this and multiplied the minus b by this negative 2c. Well, that's going to make a positive answer because two negatives make a positive, so you should be putting a plus before your answer, right? You have to decide whether it's going to be a negative or a positive answer. Don't automatically just put plus in between everything, right? Decide whether it's going to be positive or negative, and then go plus, then go minus. So let's do this whole thing. You should be starting with the 2a, right? It's the first thing in the first bracket, so chuck the 2a across, right? We multiply 2a by 3a. These things are both positive, so that would make 6a squared. 2 times 3 is 6. A times a is a squared. The 2a isn't finished yet. The 2a has to multiply over here, and the 2a is multiplying a negative, right? A negative 2c. So it's at this point we should realize we're multiplying a positive by a negative and put a minus in front of our answer. And then when I go 2a times 2c, 2 times 2 is 4, and then we put the a and the c there as well. All right, now we're done with 2a, right? There is nothing else for it to multiply. It went in once more. Now we're up to this negative b. We can do the negative b multiplying. All right, negative b and positive 3a, timesing a negative by a positive. So we're going to put a minus. And when I multiply them together, the number 3 will be at the front of the answer, because that's all I've got to work with in terms of numbers, and there'll be an a and a b there as well. And then the last part of this problem is to go the negative b times the negative 2c. Okay, so because we've multiplied these two negatives together, it's going to come out with a positive answer. There'll be a 2, because there's nothing else to times that 2 by. And the b and the c are there as well. And we look at our answer, it's got a squareds, it's got ACs, ABs, and BCs. None of those things are like terms, I have the same letter. So we're done. All right, so the key today is make sure you're doing everything in the right order, right? Start out the front, multiply that into the other bracket as much as you can. Then move on to the next part of this front bracket, times it in until it can't times anymore. You'll generally end up with 4 things. Then you've got to look at those 4 things. They should all be written down, right? You can't just skip to the answer today. Okay, look at the 4 things you've written down from your expansion. And there will be like terms. There'll be things that match, things with the same letters. You'll have to add or subtract them to make a nice simple answer, and then you'll be done.